Hey everyone, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and today I'm going to be making a beat with the Unison MIDI Chord Pack. I've always said that the foundation of any beat or musical composition is a chord progression. And if you don't know music theory very well, or you're still learning theory, sometimes this process can be a bit daunting. However, the Unison MIDI Chord Pack can be a great way to jumpstart your musical compositions. It's filled with 1,200 MIDI files that you can use to create perfectly voiced chords and chord progressions. Now, in my case, I know music theory really well. I have a master's degree in music, and I've been a professional musician since I can remember. But even so, using the Unison MIDI Chord Pack can still be a very quick and easy way for me to get instant inspiration and finish tracks faster. If you want to learn more about this MIDI Chord Pack and others from Unison, use the link in the video description below for a 60% discount. So let's jump right into this. All right, so I've got a blank Logic project pulled up over here, and then I've got a Finder window with the Unison MIDI Chord Pack. For this video, I'm going to show you the whole process from start to finish, so I'm not going to be editing out or cutting out too much. So this will be a long format beat building video, and I'll add timestamps below so you can jump around in the video if you like. Now, one of the very first things I do whenever I work on any composition is I choose a key. You just need to make a decision about either major or minor. So if you're not sure what key you want to work in, just choose C major for major keys and choose a minor for minor keys. And you can always transpose the song to a new key later. I'm going to go with C minor because I know what key that I want to work in. And the great thing about this chord pack is you have chords available for any key, any major or any minor key. So that's really great. So I'm going to go into my Unison chord pack folder here, and you'll see that there are 12 major and 12 minor keys. Now, the reason why you see, for example, I'm using C minor, you see E flat major and C minor in the same folder is because these two keys are relative keys. What that means is that these two scales or these two keys share all of the same notes. They just start on a different root note or a tonic note. Now, one way to work is to go into the Triads folder, and I'll go to C minor, and you can drag in individual triads. A triad is just a 3-note chord, and you can see that there is a chord built for each note in the C minor scale. Or what you can do is you can click on this All Triads MIDI file and drag this in, and this will show you all of the chords available in the key of C minor. So the way these are sort of referred to as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 chord. So just to start, I'll just add the vintage electric piano just as something to listen to. We may not necessarily use this as the instrument in the final beat or composition when I'm finished. And you can see that 7 chord resolves really nicely back to the 1 chord. Now, one way to work with these is you can cut out different chords and come up with your own chord progression just using triads. So for example, let's say I wanted to try a 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 4 progression. So 1, 3, 6, 4. I could just change my snap mode to bar. I'll set this to absolute value. Then I'll just use my marquee tool to sort of cut out some of these chords that I don't want to use. That's the 5 chord. This is the 6 chord, and that's the 7. So maybe I want to go 1, 3, 6, 4. So the magic of creating your own custom chord progression is to not use the chords in a scale-wise fashion. You don't want to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You typically would want to use different chord progressions and sort of jump and leap around in the scale and find a chord progression that works really nicely and just sort of matches the tonality, the texture, and the character that you're looking for your composition or your beat. Now, another way to do this is to drag these in one by one. So, for example, I could drag in the 1 chord, that's C minor. Maybe I'll go to the 7 chord, which is B flat. Then maybe I'll use the 6 chord, and then 4. So now I have 1, 7, 6, 4. Yeah, let's try something different. Let's try 1, 7, instead of 6, 4. Let's try 1, 7, 5, 6. Yeah, I really like that, but let's juice it up a bit with some extended harmonies. So what I'll do is just go back into my chord pack here, and I'll choose extended chords. I'll choose C minor, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different options here for extended chords with sevenths and add 6 and add 9s and add 13s. So there's a lot of different juicy extended harmony options here for you. And you don't really have to know any music theory to use them. Just use your ears and use the ones that sound best to you. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of just a C minor triad, I'm going to try this C minor 9 chord. And one thing I like to do is I'll set the drag mode to no overlap. And what that does is when I drag a chord on top of an existing chord, it just replaces that chord. Instead of the B flat major chord, let's try this B flat major add 9. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, it's got an interesting harmony in there. I may choose to change it later, but let's add some juicier harmonies here for the 5 and 6. So for the 5 chord, instead of just a G minor chord, let's try a G minor 7. So I'll grab this MIDI file, just drag it right on top. And then for the 6 chord, I'll try this A flat major 7. So it's still a 1, 7, 5, 6 progression. It's just got some more interesting harmonies in it. Now, the great thing about this is there's nothing limiting you to just the chords that you're given. You can alter the harmonies in any way you like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag over all of these and press J to join them. And I'll open this up in the piano roll editor, and I'm going to change up these harmonies a bit. The other great thing about joining these together and looking at all of the chords together in the piano roll is this allows you to observe the voice leading, the natural voice leading between the chords. And by voice leading, I mean the natural movement of each note in the harmonic progression. So you can see this top note leaps up, jumps down, and then jumps down. You've got these 2 dissonant notes that open up, they stay open, and then they resolve down. You've got the voice leading of the bass moving down, down again, and then up. So there's a natural leading, a natural voice leading for each of these notes in these chords that you can observe and you can work with. One thing in particular that I want to change is the voice leading of this very last chord. I've got A flat, then G, C, E flat. Instead of G here, I'm going to pull this up to A flat. So just drag over this note and then press Option up to transpose it up a half step. So now this will just be a triad with an extra low note in the bass. Another thing you can do if you're not super familiar with notes on the piano is you can click on View here in the piano roll and turn on your note labels. And this will show the pitch and octave for each note. It also shows the velocity for each note. Now for this last chord here, this top note resolves to D sharp or E flat. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of this just ending on D sharp 3, I'm going to trim this up, and then I'm going to duplicate this note up to F3. So the top note of the previous chord. So just hold Option, drag that over. And this is just going to give this a little bit of like a suspension and resolution. So I'm already customizing the chord progression that I've created with these MIDI files. So I'm going to make this the sort of main chord progression for the verse of this song. It's pretty simple. It's just whole notes and has that one sort of suspension and resolution. Now, I like to work with live loops. You don't have to work in live loops, but I'm going to pull this over to one of my empty cells here. I'll put it on cell, or scene 3 rather. I'll just double click and give this a name. I'll call this verse, but I need to create an intro, and there's going to be a second intro as well. So I'm just going to call this intro and intro 2. So once again, I can alter the existing progression here to give it some more character and some more variety. So what I'm going to do is take these top notes and give it even more sort of passing tones, more motion. So I think I'll take this G3 here. I'm going to trim this up. And then I'm going to make this sort of move upward. So do G3 to A sharp 3 or G to B flat 3. So I like this da da da, that sort of voice leading. Again, sort of paying attention to the voicing of each of the chords. I'm going to trim this up. And then this C, the C's still going to be there, but I think I'm going to save this for the second half of this chord. Now this is kind of a big jump. Let's put a note in between. So instead of just going straight from F to C, I'll put another note in here like that. So I've got this da na 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 na. So I'm already creating like a melody within these chords. And I'll do the same thing here for measure 3. And I'll do da na na na. And then this will resolve up to G. And let's pull this D sharp back where it was originally. I'll sort of re-hit this chord on the second beat of 4. And then go up to F sharp. See what that sounds like. Oops, this is supposed to be F, not F sharp. So now I'm sort of building this melody on top of these chords. So again, you don't have to use the chords just as is. You're free to alter them any way you like. Now I think I'm going to use this chord progression as my the first half of my intro. And then the second half of the intro, I'm going to change this up a bit. So that's going to be my intro number 2. So now I've got these 3 chord progressions back to back. So this is the way I like to do things. I like to build out a harmonic progression first. And to me, the chord progression is sort of like the backbone of the song. And all of my other elements I'll add later, my bass, my other synthesizers, even vocals, are sort of based around the chords and rhythms that I create with this chord progression. So another thing that's really cool about the Unison MIDI chord pack is that in addition to individual chords and triads, you can also load up whole progressions. So there's a progressions folder here for each key. And there are basic diatonic triads, but there are also some more advanced progressions. Let's check out some of these advanced progressions. So I'm going to pull in this 6-4-1-7 chord, or chord progression rather. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's really hot. The only problem with that is if I put it right here next to my verse actually ends on a 6 chord. So I have a feeling this isn't going to sound too good if I play these back to back. See how that 6 chord repeats? It's voiced a little bit different, but it's still the same chord. So I really want to use this chord progression, but I want to put it somewhere else. So I'm just going to move it over to the next scene. And then let's look for another progression for this section. So let's try out this minor progression 10. Let's pull that in. Okay, I like this, but I want it to start on C. So I'm going to just select all these notes and just hold Option and pull this down. So it starts on a C minor triad. So C, G, B flat or A sharp, D, and then D sharp. So it's like a C minor chord with some extended harmonies in there. That chord right there sounds like it wants to go back and resolve to C again. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter this chord progression. I'm going to take out these last 2 chords, and then I'm just going to copy these, put the playhead right at measure 7, and then paste that in. Let's see how that works. Now, if you want a chord to sound more resolute, sometimes you may end up taking out some of the extended harmonies. So I've got C, G. So let's take this G. Actually, let's take this D. Pull it down to C. So I'm sort of accentuating the root note. So C, G, B flat, E flat, or G sharp. Another thing you could do here is you could make this what's called a Picardy Third. A Picardy Third is when you have a minor chord progression that would normally end on the minor tonic chord, so C minor in this case. This is a C minor 7. It's got the A sharp or B flat in it. But if I change this D sharp or E flat to an E natural, now it becomes a C major chord. Let's see what this sounds like. I kind of like that sound, but I don't like the voicing of it. Remember all that voicing talk I was talking about? You've got this da na na, and I want to end on like a C here. So I'm gonna take this A sharp, move it up to C, and I bet if I take this E and move it down an octave, so Shift Option down, that might actually sound better from a voice leading standpoint. So let's give this a listen. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to pull this over, and I think what this is going to end up being is this. I think I'll make this like a build-up, into the chorus. So I'll just call this build-up, and then this one that I added earlier will be the chorus. And I think what I'm going to do is make a bridge section, which is both of the intros back to back. And I think the bridge will also play as part of the intro. So it'll be like intro with like another layer playing, and then bridge will be like an instrumental section, and then that'll jump into the verse. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chord progression of the first intro, and then the chord progression from the second intro, join those together, Just press J. And then what I'll do is just right-click or control-click on this verse scene. And there's an option to insert empty scene. It'll add an empty scene right before that. Then I'll just pull this over. So I'm going to call this intro 3/bridge. So now I have a complete sketch, or the backbone, the chord progression for this song. Now, whether you use these chords as is or you sort of extrapolate other ideas from them is completely up to you. You can use them just as a reference and then just ultimately mute this track, or you can actually use this track as part of the composition. It's completely up to you. Next, I want to add some drums. So just double click and create a new software instrument. I'll go to Electronic Drum Kit and I'll try out this East Side Dreams kit. And I'll start by creating a beat for the verse. So just right click or control click and select Create Pattern Cell. And I can load this up in the step sequencer. You know, it's a little fast. Let's go to like eighth notes instead. For the hi-hat, I'm just going to do something like this. But I want the hi-hat to have some like dynamics to it. So I'll click here and I'll just alter the velocity here. Just pull down the velocity a bit in each of these groups of 3. And let's make this 32 steps long. And just sort of play around with this a bit. There's this, let's see. Oh, that's cool. It's like a little kick roll. See what that sounds like. I'm going to add crashes later as individual samples on their own cells, so I'm going to avoid using crashes here in the beat. Although one thing I am going to do is give this a little bit more swing. I'll just click on this I button, and I'm just going to pull the swing up just a touch. Not enough for it to sound like actual swing, but enough just to give it a little bit more groove. And I'll make this an eighth note swing, it's like 55%, just to make it sound a little bit more human. Yeah, 55 is a little too much, so I went with 53. So just a very, very light amount of swing, just enough to sort of give it a little bit more of a human character to it. Let's take this same pattern and let's move this over to the intro here. And let's alter this beat a little bit. One thing I don't like is the tone of the hi-hat is a little dark for my taste. I want to make that a little brighter. So just in Drum Machine Designer, I can either pull up the pitch or I can maybe pull up the tone. I'll also pull up the low cut that'll sort of filter out some of the high end, or the low end rather. I'll also add a little reverb and delay as well. There we go. And I think I'll bring out the kick drum a bit more. I'll pull down the length, pull in the sub, and pull up the volume a bit. And I think I'll use this same beat for the chorus. Now, for the build-up, I want to make this even more sort of straightforward. So I'm going to get rid of these little ghost notes. And I'm just going to sort of layer up the snares on 2 and 4. I'll keep everything else that's going on in here, but I'm just going to add in some extra kicks here. So it's just do cha, do cha, do cha. And I'll add a note in here as well. Do cha. And I'll go do cha. Yeah, do something like that. I have a noise crash sample here that I want to just drag in. When you load in any sort of audio file or sample or loop into Live Loops, it'll try to conform it to the tempo of the project, and it'll also automatically put it on a loop. But something like a crash, I just want it to happen once. So I'll just drag over that cell, go up to the cell inspector here, and turn off the loop. So that way it'll just play once. So I'll just call this crash noise effects. Pull the volume down a bit, and I'll just copy this over to all three of these sections. That's just to accent the front end of each of those sections. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment with maybe adding a pad to sort of layer these electric piano chords. I do like the electric piano, but I think I'm going to go with a different preset. Let's try out this Hip Rhodes preset. Yeah, I like that sound. I just pulled out the phaser. I think it was a bit much. And what I'll do is just create a new track. I'm going to duplicate these chords, all of them, down to the new track. And on this new track, I'm going to create some sort of like a pad type instrument. So let me go ahead and load up Alchemy on this track. And then in Alchemy, I'll go search for some pads. I'll go to pads. Yeah, this alone pad is really nice. And I don't want that like really loud in the mix. It's just going to be there to sort of reinforce the chords. I want to add some time-based effects. So I think what I'm going to do is create an aux track just by sending this over to bus 4. So this is creating an effects send. And I'm going to actually create 2 effects sends. One is going to be like a delay effect, and the other one's going to be a reverb. So let's start with the delay effects here. Pull this up. On this, I'll just add the stereo delay. Under delay, stereo delay. And notice, because I'm using this on an aux track, I'm keeping the output mix at 100% because I just want to hear the delay on the aux track. I don't want to hear any of the dry signal. However, there's a trick I like to do to pitch shift delays. On this same aux track before the stereo delay, I'll go down to pitch, and I'll go to pitch shifter, and I'm going to transpose this up an octave, so 12 semitones. I'll set the mix to... let's put it like a little over 50%. And then the timing, I'll put this on pitch tracking, and then I'll turn on the latency comp. Now here's a situation where you may choose to actually pull down the amount, so I'm hearing a little bit of the dry signal as well. I think what I'll do is I'll put this on 100%, but then I'll blend down this so you can hear some of the dry signal of the pitch shifter coming through the stereo delay as well. It gives it sort of like a toy music box sort of sound. And then on my reverb track, I'll just load up Space Designer, and I'll just use one of these presets in here. One of my favorite ones under plate reverbs is this shimmering plate. And what I like to do is I like to feed the delay into the reverb to give it more ambience. So I'm going to bus the delay over into the reverb, which is bus 5. And what you can do is you can put this on pre-fader mode. so that the level of the delay aux does not affect the amount of signal going into the reverb. So if I just want just a little bit of the dry signal of the delay, and then I want most of this to be going over to the reverb and creating this ambient effect, I can do that. You can't do that in post fader or post pan. I don't think the pad needs any more time-based effects, so I'll just leave that one alone. Now, for Drum Machine Designer, you can actually, in Drum Machine Designer, for each pad, you can add reverb here. But another way to do this is, like, for example, if I want my snares to have a little bit more reverb, but I want it to be the same reverb that I'm using for my other instruments, you could just open up the Drum Machine Designer stack, and you can add another effect send over to the reverb aux track, and then roll that up. So you can individually affect the instruments within Drum Machine Designer without having to even open up Drum Machine Designer. You can add whatever custom effects you want to them. Now, one of the cool things about coming up with a chord progression first is you can use the chord progression as a reference for the bass. The easiest way to do this is just to create a new track. And I'll just load up bass, fingerstyle bass. And what you can do is just take the chord progression down to the bass track, and then you can open up each one of these and delete all of the notes except for the bottom note. So that's one really quick way to create a bass line. Just make sure it's in the correct range. I'll do the same thing here. Pull out everything except for the bottom note. And I'll just go across and do the same thing for each of these chord progressions. Now, you don't have to, you could just leave it that way, but you don't have to stop there. You can actually go through and you can add passing tones and different, non-chord tones to these bass lines to make them more interesting. So for example, for my bridge here, my bridge/intro, maybe what I'll do is try to add in some little quarter note passing tones. There we go. So now I've got a bass line that's a bit more interesting than just using all root notes. All I'm doing is I'm using my ear, but I'm staying in key. I'm making sure that I'm only using notes that are in the C minor scale, but these may be notes that are not necessarily in the chords, so they're not necessarily chord tones. Some of them can be, but others may not be. I'll do this same thing for the chorus. So what I'll do is, again, kind of go a little crazy with the passing tones here. I want to add a little more variation to this, so I'm just going to drag over all of these, press Command R to repeat them. Now, the only thing that's tricky here is the cell is still only going to play 4 bars. So what you have to do is click on that cell, go to your cell inspector here, and change the loop length and cell length to 8 bars. And now that'll play all 8 bars. But in my second repetition, I kind of want to do the same thing, this da-da-da-dum down to the F. But instead of going up to C2, I'm going to go down to C1. Sometimes I just like to throw in like a low octave. And I'll use this same motion, but instead of going to G up here, I think what I'll do is go down to D. So I get this da-na-nam, this, 3, 2, 1 sort of motion. Now, one tricky thing here is because the drum beat has this little bit of natural swing in it, I want to do the same thing with the bass. So even though I typed in these notes, I didn't, and actually they're based on the chords from the chord pack, I'm going to quantize them with a little bit of swing. So I'm going to quantize these to a 8th note with just a tiny, tiny little bit of swing, not a lot. So I'll hit Q, and all it's going to do is that second note is just going to ever so slightly move off the grid. As a matter of fact, I think I can probably use a little bit more. Maybe like that. Yeah, so instead of da-na-nam, it's going to be da-na-nam. Not quite that exaggerated. I'll do the same thing for the intro here. Just add a touch of swing. Just ever so slightly, just to make it sound a little bit more human. So I got my bass, my pad, my chords, my drums, my effects crash. What's next? I think I want to add some sort of like a synthesizer idea, like an arpeggiated idea, especially for the intro. I want it to maybe kick in right here and then continue over to the bridge or intro 3. So let's use a chord pack chord for this. I'll go into my extended chords again, C minor. I'm going to throw in this C minor 9 chord, and I think I'll just load up retro synth for this, and I will throw the arpeggiator on here. Let's transpose this up an octave, Shift Option up. I want something a little softer than that. Let's try out a synth lead. Let's try out this cheerful melody. And I'm going to go ahead and run this through bus 4 just a touch, and then also bus 5 for the reverb. When I have an arpeggiated chord like this, but there's sort of an underlying chord progression going on in the background, what I like to do is take the top notes of the chord and just keep them the same. So for 4 bars, I'll just stretch this out just like so. And again, I need to click on this, go up to the cell inspector, and then make sure that my loop length is 4 now instead of 1, so it plays all of that. I'll just extend out the length of the MIDI region there as well, so it's all 4 bars. And what I'll do is I'll make the bottom note of the chord follow the bass line of the chord progression. So the chord progression here is C, A sharp, G, G sharp, or C, B flat, G, A flat. I'll just go in here and I'll take this C, go down to B flat or A sharp, then it was G, and then A flat or G sharp. So now the bass is following the chords, but these upper ideas are more like a melodic idea. And by the way, if you're not sure how to clear cells, if you're new to working with live loops, you can simply press Command Return, and that will reset all cells. And when you have no cells sort of queued for playback, you can just cue a cell down here either by clicking on it and pressing Return, or just by clicking on the arrow. Cool, let's copy that over to the intro. And I think I've got a pretty good arrangement built out now. So with the exception of building out the arrangement in the tracks area and adding things like transitions and vocals, I've got the main part of my musical arrangement ready to go. So let's give this whole thing a listen. So with a big help from the Unison MIDI chord pack, I was able to easily build out this beat. A big thanks to Unison for sponsoring this video, and if you want to check out any of the MIDI chord packs from Unison, head over to unison.audio or check out the link in the video description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you for the support and thanks for watching.